Hello again. Today we are finding the least common denominator. Okay? So I have two fractions here. I have 2 over 5x and I have 4 over 7x. And I need to find the least common denominator, or the LCD. Alright? So to find the LCD, for each term, I need to have a prime factorization, okay? So on the bottom of the first fraction, I have a 5x, which means 5 times x. And on the bottom of the second fraction, I have a 7x, which means 7 times x. So in order to find my LCD, I need to take the greatest power of each factor and then multiply them. So I have a 5 times a 7. And notice that I have an x and an x. So they're both a power of 1. So I'm going to multiply that also by x, because the greatest power of x here is 1. So 5 times 7 is 35 times x is 35x. So here I have 8 over 3x and 2 over x plus 4. So I need to find my LCD, which is my least common denominator. And my first fraction, I have a 3x, which is 3 times x. And for my second fraction, the denominator is x plus 4, which is a factor all in of its own, and there's nothing that can be factored out of that, so that factor is x plus 4. Well, nothing more can be done with this one, and nothing more can be done with this one, so my LCD is actually 3x times x plus 4. That could also be simplified as 3x squared plus 12x, but you'd be just fine leaving it as 3x times x plus 4, which will actually make it easier if you need to reduce it. So here I have 2 over 7x and 3 over 4x squared. Well, my prime factorization of the first denominator is 7x, and my prime factorization of the second denominator is going to be 2 squared times x squared, because remember, 2 squared is 4, okay? So my highest power of 7 is 7, and my highest power of 2 is 2 to the second power. Alright, so I'll have 7 times 2 to the second power, which is 4. And now, as far as x's go, the highest power of x is 2, so I will have x to the second power. Now I can simplify this 7 and this 4 by multiplying them, and I'll get 28x squared. So my LCD is 28x squared. Let's say I have x over 2x and 7 over 2 times x minus 1. Alright, so on our first fraction, my factors are 2 and x for the first denominator, and on my second denominator, I have 2 times x minus 1. Alright, so if I'm looking for my least common denominator, you'll notice that the highest power of 2 is 1, so I will say 2 times my highest power of x is x, and I have my x minus 1 here is also a factor, so that's times x minus 1. So that leaves me with 2x times x minus 1, and that is my least common denominator. So let's say I have x plus 5 over x squared plus 2x minus 8 and x minus 7 over x squared plus x minus 12. Well, if I have a trinomial on the bottom of my fraction, what I can do is I can factor each of those denominators. So I'll make my two parentheses, and I'll factor the first one here as x and x, and what two numbers multiply together to be negative 8 but add together to be positive 2? Well, that would be negative 2 and positive 4. And for this one here, two numbers that multiply together to be negative 12 but add together to be positive 1, because remember that's 1x, right? So those would be x, and two numbers that multiply together to be a negative. It would have to be a positive and a negative, right? And so those two numbers would be 4 and 3. All right? So if we're looking for our least common denominator, remember, every factor we're looking for the highest power. Well, this is a factor, this is a factor, this is a factor, and this is a factor. Notice that there are two x plus 4s. So that means I can have an x plus 4 times x minus 2 times x minus 3. And that is our least common denominator.